Hi, welcome to Dirty Living Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Meese, and today I've got Jordan Arsenault with us. Jordan is a master in the digital marketing space. She's been in that for several years. Excited to hear her story and just how she's come up through the industry. Jordan, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk with you. I know that we've known each other for quite some time now, and I feel like every time we talk, it's knowledge bombs. So I'm really excited to share that with other people and maybe share what we've worked on together.
It's very exciting. I think the marketing in general, and then even more so the digital marketing space, is something that the industry really lacks deep knowledge on, right? I know that there's probably some companies that do that really well. I think we're going to be having some really good conversation today about how they can use that effectively, what it actually is, and how to apply it to their business, whether it's a small business, medium size, or even larger. So, but first off, tell us about Jordan. Tell me how did you get started, and then how you have evolved through your career. Then we'll dive into the marketing side.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm one of those odd people that actually use their college degrees. I think I knew from a pretty young age that I wanted to be a businesswoman. Growing up, getting married, having kids, that really wasn't my idea of success. I contribute that to my strong, hardworking angel of a mother. I look back at growing up and having chores and having responsibilities and things like that that really contributed to that. When I went to college, I studied undergrad in public relations, and I love to write. I love representing different companies and all the projects that went along with that. And I actually got a scholarship to stay at the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, and get my master's in marketing. So I didn't plan on staying there. I didn't even plan on getting my master's. But at that point in 2008, everybody had gone back to get their masters because of the recession. Those were the first people to go. So I was like, you know what? In order to compete with these folks and in the job market, I'm really going to have to put my head down for another couple years. And I fell in love with the data. I fell in love with the numbers, all of the things that public relations didn't have in the business, marketing had. And I worked a lot in college, and there were two people in that program that started working at a marketing agency in town. And they were like, you need to just interview with this company. I'm like, I am not staying in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where I went to college. Like, I got to get out of here. I got to go see things. God had different plans, I feel like, because I stayed. I loved that industry. And I swear that I fell in love with the corporate side of the blue collar world at that company. We worked with trucking companies, construction, agriculture, aggregates, landscaping, and I really understand that those people work hard in those industries, and figuring out what makes people in those industries buy was just fascinating to me. So I started in digital marketing. I really did not know what I was getting myself into, Jason. It was an entry level job. It was marketing. It seemed fascinating at the time. I'm from a pretty small town. And when I went home one summer, they were like, yeah, I heard you're working for Google. And I was like, Not exactly. Like, people didn't really know what digital marketing was back then. And that was about 11 years ago. And so I did get Google certified. I got Facebook certified, and we were doing all of those things for various clients. It was then where I realized, man, like, this can really have an impact on people's success, on company success. And I liked that. I liked really affecting their business in a positive way. And they trusted me with their money, and I don't take that lightly. And so that was where my love of digital marketing started, and just the fascination behind running campaigns for people.
So when you first got started, did you anticipate digital marketing space becoming what it is today? Because it is obviously just been a takeover, right? And there's a ton of it's like a lot of things. The internet has given it a lot of misinformation out there, and then there's also a lot of really good information out there. But more than anything, it's just huge, right? It's become a very big animal to manage, and also can be very beneficial to businesses of all types, right? So did
I
you
think you're exactly right.
what was your anticipation when you first got into that? Was it sounds like it was just, oh, this is another aspect of marketing that we can try, but that obviously turned out to be the forefront of marketing today, right?
Yeah, one way to put it is for the company that I worked at, there were 5 of us when I started. And I just left a couple months ago with that digital agency, and there were about 100 people in that department at that point, I think. It's split into multiple divisions, and so to say that it took off over the past decade is really an understatement. And I think at that time, people were just gravitating towards the shiny new object. And it's funny because now the advice that I give people is don't do that. Don't just because it's the shiny new object, don't just gravitate towards that. So it's a little bit of a contradiction as far as the success of my career, I think. But people say, back then they were thinking, oh, well, we want to do search, Google search, we want to do YouTube, we want to do Facebook. And I don't think anybody really knew to stop and say, well, why do you want to do this? Like, what is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? How is this going to help you meet those goals and increase your sales? Because we all know that marketing's goal is to increase sales. And digital marketing specifically is really just a tactic to be able to do that. And so, as much of a digital marketing girl as I am, that is my forte. I really caution people now to say, hey, let's back up. Let's slow down and say, like, is this really what you need? And if it is, then there's some rights and wrongs and some ways that you can do it. I was consulting with a company, and they're an aggregates company. Their sand pit is in a different location than their rock yard for 57 stone and riprap and all the other things that they sell. The owner of the company was a little bit frustrated that the people who knew that they sold sand didn't know that they sold all of those other things, right? All these other products which make them more money. And I asked him, I'm like, well, do you have a sign at the sand pit? Do you have a sign out there that shares that with them? And because he was demanding that we do Google marketing. And he was like, well, no. And I'm like, well, a lot of the people who are buying sand are buying rock, right? Like, I think they gravitate towards the thing, the big flashy thing that they want people to see, but they overlook some of the simple things. So I'm probably one of those rare digital marketing people that will really advocate to make sure you have your basics taken care of before you move into digital marketing.
Right. That's really interesting because I feel like that applies so much probably on the sales side too, right? You've been on both sides of that space and also with consumers in general, right? I feel like consumers are trained by marketing and sales practices over time. And so
Mm-hmm.
what's effective today when it comes to the flashy stuff or the things that they know is marketing, they know is a sales pitch, they know when you're asking me questions like this you're trying to sell to me, right? And so they become very educated about those things over time. But the fundamentals, I was just telling someone this the other day, the fundamentals are the fundamentals because they're effective, right? They're highly effective, and we have to make sure you don't get fundamentals without them being effective. You get flash without them being consistently effective over time. And so you have these periodic things that work and can be trained and be effective during their period. But most of the time, by the time that is largely aware, there's a large awareness from the market, people are already trained, right? The consumer's already trained, that's already hitting them, right? So when I get on, if I'm scrolling through reels or TikTok or whatever, right? It's sponsored, I'm looking immediately, oh, it's sponsored, flip through, right? We're already trained to bypass a lot of that information. But you go back to the fundamentals, which is brand awareness, brand expansion, those are and the other piece, and I've coached basketball for a long time, is just what's effective, what is actually, let's focus on, yes, we can draw up any play that you want, we can run any type of defense that you want, but what is actually effective and what's actually working today, right? What is
Mm-hmm.
actually going to get our ball in that goal more than they get it in our goal, right? And
Right.
so sometimes that is so basic, but it really is. And I feel like it's so easy with as much information as we're hit with today, as much as we have going on, it's so easy to do that. It's so easy to look right past just the very basic things of, well, so if you have two pits, is that on your business card? Do you have a sign out front that's there? So I love that. Sorry, I got carried away there, but
You make a fair point. I think the stat is so dated, but I used to tell people all the time, like, the average American sees over 4,000 marketing messages in a day. And I'm sure it's a lot more than that now, especially with the way that we're ingesting content. You just mentioned reels and things like that. Well, they're much, much shorter. So I would imagine that if we're ingesting shorter content, then you're ingesting more of it. So, like I said, that stat is just got to be bigger. And over the past decade of being this marketing consultant, it really transitioned from me saying, okay, here's what digital marketing is and educating people and then helping them use it for their business versus now everyone knows what that is because it's so in your face and it's so much a part of our daily lives and how we really make decisions. You just mentioned another great example that I want to point out as far as being sponsored. A lot of people, 5 years ago, it's like if they sponsored, or even now, like it may say it's sponsored, you can't really trust it. Like, are the facts and stuff that they're spitting out on this reel or on this video, are they legit? And I think you can really do a lot of damage to your brand or to the product that you're selling if you do not proceed with caution in that particular arena. And I think that when you're producing content, there's a guy that I will give a shout out to. His name is Andrew Davis, and he is a quirky, phenomenal marketing guy. Like, if you're into marketing, please look up his videos. It's fascinating. But he spoke at a couple of our events, and one of the things that he said as far as creating content is he said, you can't make it too salesy. You cannot make it too salesy. And that really stuck with me in my transition from actually running the digital marketing campaigns, transitioning into sales. When, if you make it salesy and you read 5 ways to increase market share or 5 mistakes to avoid when trying to sell equipment or whatever it is, right? Like, you're reading that content because you are genuinely interested in the topic and you want to learn something. You're trusting that person to give you advice. And it really is white papers and videos and content like this is really the best way to represent your brand or to help people without that sales rep being in front of them. And so if you get to the bottom of that content and it has the sales pitch, it's like, man, they got me. Like, people don't like getting got. And it's like, God, like I fell for that. And there's this little bit of distrust or apprehension to really take those points that we read or that we watched seriously. So I think the amount of content that we're ingesting is higher. I think the trust is probably smaller. And so I think it's really interesting to me how those two things alone had changed how we sell things or how people buy.
Absolutely. I love all of that. I think I was just having, a side conversation that falls into that category the other day where we were building something and they were like, well, we want to push it here and we want to push it. I was like, you know what? Consumers are very intelligent today. If you create interest and you give them a pathway to finding your material, or you're like, man, I want to know more about that. I'm like, you don't really have to do that much. They're going to find it. If you give them a pathway and you put that in front of them without you having to sell, the interested parties are going to pursue it. And that's going to bring you may not get the same volume, but the quality of that lead, the quality of that feedback is going to be a lot higher.
I love that. I love that
Mhm.
you're having that quantity versus quality conversation with people because it's crucial. You don't need to spray and pray, but if you are not intentionally spending your marketing dollars or intentionally sending your sales reps out or guiding them through the process of being intentional, then, gosh, you're probably wasting a lot of money. And one of the examples from so long ago was when YouTube first came on the scene, as far as how that affects other campaigns. I remember very clearly running a Google search campaign for a client, and we had been running this campaign for about a year. We had enough data to test other things outside channels to see how it affected that Google search campaign. And here comes YouTube. And nobody really knew if YouTube was going to be a lead generation platform. Was it awareness? All of that was really unestablished at the time. And so we turned YouTube on for this client for a quarter, turn it off for a quarter, turn it on for a quarter, turn it off for a quarter. So you're talking about this is 2 years worth of data that we're looking at. And every single time YouTube was turned on, more search terms happened. So, to your point that you just mentioned, a lot of marketing is intangible, but its goal is to create curiosity and interest.
Right.
So, it indirectly affected the search campaign, which is a lead generation channel. People are there to buy, people are there to compare prices. They typically know what they want, they know that they want this product. Now, what they put in that search bar is really dependent upon the information that they have up until that point. And so I think there's so many ways that you can capture those people and even intercept the competitors that are around you, intercept their traffic. And there's lots of really creative ways, but I love that you said create the interest, because I think a lot of people fail to see that or fail to put the time, effort, and money into those types of channels because they want the flashy leads. Like, they want leads. Leads or die. Like, that's not the way. That will not set you up for success always if you're just so lead focused.
Well, I want to get back to this a little bit. We talked about covering a lot today, but one of the things too that I think when we're talking to somebody about not just marketing, but the market today, right? You have an educated consumer. You also have a habitual consumer. From my perspective, if you put the effort and the money first invested into convenience and quality, the marketing is in this day and age, and I think that this is going to be a lot of we know across every industry there's becoming a great separation of talent turnover and job changes and really job type. A lot of industries are being affected just by some of it's by technology, some of it's post COVID. There's just a lot of factors there, but the thing that seems to be really coming from my perspective up on the horizon is a need for quality and the desire for convenience, right? And those two, that combination of those two things drives a lot of margin, right? Bottom line is that drives a lot of margin. And the other thing, though, that I feel like it does is that when you make it easy and you make it good, we're seeing a lot of organic marketing that happens because of the natural the social environments. And so you see a lot of secondhand marketing that's happening by companies that are doing really well in their space. And so you're seeing a lot more content that includes their product or is just organically being talked about or shared and things like that. So I know that moves away from a little bit, but I think it's important to have that awareness too, because companies, and I had this conversation with a guy the other day. We were talking about the industry's in a little bit of a downturn. And I told him he's very good at what he does. He runs very clean operations. They're highly effective at what they do. I said, man, I don't know that the world will ever slow down for you again, right? It's going to slow down for a lot of people, but there's such a small percentage of really quality providers out there that I said, I just don't think it's going to slow down for you. It's just a matter of making sure that you continue that because you're building that organic. It's almost a word of mouth thing, but on a much larger scale, right? It's that small town. I always used to joke when I moved to Springfield, Missouri from Phoenix, Arizona. In Phoenix, you could screw up on one side of town and go to the other side of town. Nobody knew who you were. You could just, it was like, oh, it was a great learning environment because I'm like, oh, I can screw up endlessly here and
It
do,
was forgiving
yeah,
for you.
yeah. And then in Springfield, by the time you got across town, everybody knew what you'd done that morning, right?
Yeah.
And it's
I
one of
think you bring up a really good point. I think that when you're looking at market share or increasing sales, whether that's for a dealer or whether that's for the contractor themselves, if you think of it in its simplest terms, increasing sales or increasing market share, it's going to come from two places. You're either going to have to get people who are entering into the market, or you're going to have to take it from your competitors. It's real simple. If your competitor messes up, you want to be there to say, hey, we're going to give you better service. We're going to give you better quality. Enter the reason why they're leaving your competitor, right? And they'll
Right.
tell you, people are going to tell you. I think if you have a negative experience, they say that you're 11 times more likely to share it. If you have a positive experience, I think you're 4 times as likely to share it. So the odds are stacked against the people who mess up. But as far as an opportunity for a contractor or a dealer or OEM or whatever it is, that is your opportunity to move the needle. Now, as far as getting people who are entering into this space, how can you target people or reach people that you don't know, that you don't even know are coming into this space? That's where the branding and that's where the multiple touch points and the word of mouth really helps. I think that depending on what your opportunity is as a business owner or as a sales rep, I think the tactics change.
I love it. So I want to back up here just a little bit. We talked about, I think it's really important, and I want to hit some key points. So the first thing, how would you just, for someone that is not in the marketing space, right? We love the blue collar world. That's what we like to do, where most of those, especially smaller businesses, right? They know that they need some level of that, but oftentimes that's not their background. That's not where they came from. So what are some, what, first off, so I feel like we've defined marketing, right? Define marketing. And then what are some baby steps that you would take if you're a new business owner, or you're just start entrepreneur that's starting, or maybe you've been in business for a couple of years and things are starting to slow off it naturally because of just the market right now? And what are some things that maybe you would say, hey, these are the foundation of just a couple things that I would do that are fairly simple or fairly fundamental that I would make sure my business had?
I think that's a fantastic question. This is probably not the answer that people expect me to say first, but it is make sure that your sales department is where you want it to be. Again, marketing's goal is to increase sales. You can have the coolest website in the world, you can have phenomenal campaigns, you can have a ton of leads coming in, but if you do not have the sales reps that are following up with those leads, that are saying the right thing, that are capitalizing on the marketing that you're doing, it is all for nothing. I would really recommend tracking your sales as much as possible. And what that may look like for, let's say, an equipment dealer or somebody who actually has a physical product that the consumer has to come in to really test drive or maybe get a demo of or something along those lines. I would say, are they connected with 100% of the people in their territory? Probably not, right? Like, what are you doing to increase that face to face? Because we all know that face to face is better. It just always will be. There's going to be no marketing that takes the place of face to face. So I think that if your sales reps are doing all that they can to get in front of those people, the next step would be, what's their capacity as far as funneling leads to them or getting walk-in traffic? What does that look like? Or can they take 10 more phone calls a day? Can they call 20 more leads a day? And really try to turn it into a mathematical equation. That really terrifies a lot of people, but it's simple. If you've got a sales rep that, or even a business development person that's making 100 phone calls a day, and you figure out their connection rate, maybe they're getting in touch with like 80 of those people a day, they're making about 10 sales from that, right? Like, you just go next step in the mathematical equation and you work backwards. And again, I know it sounds really daunting to some people, but you really have to understand what your sales rep's capacity is in order to know how much effort and money you need to put into your marketing campaign. If you're a small business and you don't want to grow and it's more about retention, your marketing plan is going to be so different than somebody who is eager to grow, really wanting to increase their territory or increase their sales. So I think making sure your sales are in check, regardless of what that looks like, is step number one. And then step number two is working backwards into a goal. So many people just really say, I want to do Google, or I want to do YouTube. I want videos. I want this. I want that. And they don't really know what the end goal is. So many people are like, oh, I want clicks to my website. What
Why?
do you want them to do? Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Like, well, what do you want them to do after they get there?
Right.
And it's like, well, I want them to fill out a form. Okay, well, then you really don't want clicks. You
Right.
want forms, which again leads to sales. So I think really being honest about what your goals are and then creating the marketing channels and specifically the marketing budget around that, and understanding that there are multiple marketing campaigns. I think one of my nemesis when I first started selling digital marketing is telling people that you cannot have more than one goal in a campaign. Like, you can't have the goal in search or Facebook be clicks and traffic and also have it be leads. Like,
Right.
it's just not the same thing. And people who don't understand digital marketing, they don't understand the back end of how complex that is. So just take my word for it. Free consulting here, right? Like, you have to pick a goal. You can have multiple goals, but that means multiple campaigns.
So I think I totally get where you're going with that, but I want to dive into the fundamentals of why that is, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
what you just hit on is so important. Explain the difference of what you're doing if you're targeting, because there is a target for clicks, right? We do have
Yes.
that as a goal sometimes. And then we also have a goal for leads, and those are not the same thing. And so, can you break down, explain why you would target for clicks versus leads? I feel like is one of those self explanatory things for most people. And I think that's probably 80% of the time what people are really going for is they're trying to do lead generation. But what would be the purpose of clicks?
So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish in terms of, think of clicks or really anything outside of sales, direct sales, right? So if you want somebody to come to your demo day, or if you want somebody to know that you are going to be at the Chili Bowl Festival, like some sort of event marketing, I would say clicks are perfectly acceptable, because that means that you are letting this person know. And once they get past that click, then they know. They see what's on the landing page or the website, and the landing page just being a marketing buzzword for the place that you land on after that click. So it can be your website, it can be a standalone site, but a click is informational. A lead is definitely going to be a phone call, a form, maybe specifically if you're buying parts or something along those lines. Like if you're putting it in a shopping cart, those would technically be the leads or sales. And the biggest reason why you can only have one goal per campaign is because of the algorithm. This voodoo magic back end thing that seems really scary as far as Google and Facebook, and nobody really knows what goes into it. One of the things, for example, is they know what apps you have open on your phone. If you have workout apps on your phone, or you have dating apps on your phone, well, guess what? On all of those apps, you are going to see those particular ads now that maybe you ever clicked on Facebook, right? So the algorithm is using so many data points that it can identify prospects that are more likely to click, or people who are more likely to fill out the form. So sometimes those are not the same people. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you really want a form, I don't care if it's $100 cost per click, because you do pay per click. And I don't care if it's $100 cost per click if they're going to fill out the form, because now I have $100 cost per lead, right? So I think that people get really hung up in how much a click costs in some cases, but you really have to calculate and use your budget based on the end goal, based on that. So many people say, oh, I'm getting $1 cost per click here, I'm getting a $2 cost per click there. I'm like, yeah, but how many qualified leads are you getting? How many sales are you making from that? And they're like, oh, well, we don't know. And I'm like, well, then you don't know that click is valuable. It's cheap, but it may not be doing anything valuable for you.
Yep. So I like to think of it too as like informative. And I think different platforms are used this way and used inappropriately sometimes or wrongly. But I like to think of it as clicks are informing an existing audience, but really I'm informing them on something that I'm a part of, something that we're offering when they're already somewhat aware of the brand to some extent, or they're aware of the product, versus lead generation, which I think you did a really good job. But I think different platforms, the same thing. You can, as a business, you have community building, which is I'm just expanding my internal audience. I'm giving them more information about what we do and building community and rapport with them versus trying to actually expand the market. And both of those things are a version of marketing, but one's more brand awareness and one's more brand expansion, I would guess you would call it.
I would say that in order for people buy from companies or people that they know, like, or trust. People really get hung up on like the lead or the in sale. But I would say that to somebody starting out, or even somebody who's established, if you are beelining to leads or to sales, then you're almost doing yourself a disservice by not allowing them to get to know you first. There's a stat out there that says like 72% of people know that they are going to purchase before they even talk to a sales rep. And if you think about that for a second, if you slow down and think, 72% of people are making the decision without your sales rep. Like, I thought I had a lot more sway than that, but no, I'm not that good. You're not that good as a sales rep. It's very much the content that you put out, to your point earlier, of different reels and different webinars and different things on your website. It's okay if they are ingesting that information and not making the decision, because they're still getting to know you. So every touch point is valuable.
Coming from the sales side of things, I want to relate this to one of the things that I don't think salespeople always recognize, especially in the earlier stages of their career, is how critical that marketing is to their success, or can be. Every lead's not a good lead, right? But every lead is an effective lead. And going back to the math, what you were talking about earlier, every lead is an effective lead because it gets me closer to the next sale, right? If you really think about that, what you were saying earlier about it being a mathematical equation, right? So for sales reps, I had one actually come by the other day. Door-to-door salesman comes by and he was offering something that I absolutely didn't need. And so he gets done and I said, hey, listen, I said, I'm going to help you out, but I'm not going to help you in the way that you expected. He's like, okay. I was like, I'm going to help you out by telling it's just a no. For me, it just doesn't fit. And he's like, okay. I was like, but I'm also going to tell you how that helps you. You are now closer to your next sale. Congratulations. Because this is a mathematical process, I want you to understand, because it didn't work, because you got a bad lead, you're that much closer to a good lead. You're that much closer to a yes. You're that much closer. So don't take the bad lead as a bad lead that was worthless to you. Take it as the next step to a good lead, because there's going to be, whether I'm cold calling or whether I'm working off a set of leads, warm leads, whatever it is, there's going to be a certain amount that click and a certain amount that don't. And for everyone, that's just a mindset. For everyone that doesn't, I'm just closer to the one that does.
I think that's a really good point. And first of all, you were probably really nice to him and he's probably not used to that. So that's awesome. I think it's important to define a bad lead. And I think that this is the difference between marketing and sales. And this is why a lot of marketing departments and sales departments go head to head. There's a little bit of friction between some of them sometimes.
Right.
And it's because marketing thinks, in a lot of cases, hey, I got you the lead, my job's done, right? Absolutely not. And I think that a true marketing person who has that intent to sell and to help grow the company is going to tell you, like, is it a qualified lead? And what does that mean? Like, is it they saw your ad because it's an 8-year-old kid on their mom's iPad and they're really interested in Caterpillar or John Deere, whatever it is, or on the dad's iPad, or it's in the industry and maybe they got targeted that ad. That's a bad lead from marketing and from sales, right? Everybody could agree that 8-year-old kid is not going to buy this tractor or whatever it may be, or become a customer of a contractor. Now, that's a bad lead. But for sales to say that it's a bad lead, I've heard sales define it as, oh, well, he's not ready to buy yet. Okay, well, is he in the industry? And first of all, it's a male of buying age, right? Like,
Yeah.
is he in the industry? Well, yeah, he's in the industry. Does he own other equipment? Sticking with that dealer example. And yeah, he owns other equipment, but he's just shopping around right now. He's not looking to buy. It may be the end of the year, right? He's going to wait for the Section 179 tax break or whatever it is. And I'm like, it's only a few months away. Like, that is where sales will say it is a bad lead, quote, bad
I
lead.
put you in front of it, dude.
Yes, like, you have to nurture it. So I
Right.
think that clearly defining with all parties in the room, right? Get sales and marketing in the room together. And I know sometimes that could be like herding cats and it is painful, but I promise you it is going to prevent so many problems and so much animosity going forward. So, like, clearly define the lead, clearly define what is qualified. And then it's marketing's job to try to go back and say, hey, we were running this particular ad on Facebook that kind of had a cartoon feel to it. And maybe this is, but the data shows that this is what this 8-year-old kid responded to. we need to stop doing that, right? Or turn that bad ad off. And here where all the good leads came from. So if the marketing team is not tracing back the good leads or the good calls or recording those and going through them, there is such a missed opportunity. Qualify the lead, like determine what that looks like before the campaign start for everybody's sake, and then also really go backwards to dig into that data. So many people just don't take that step.
So it's really funny because the data, and I was having a conversation about this the other day, and I want to, while we're talking about the sales and marketing combination, and a total data nerd and love that stuff. But what's really funny is I'm 20 years into what I would call my formal career. I grew up in the industry, but I hated call reports. I hated writing down. I hated delivering that information back. I'm like, it's in my phone, it's in my head. I know what I need to be doing. I was the worst, and literally down to the place where I interviewed for a job and told them a condition of my employment was that I did not do call report. And so this is like, not very many people hated that as much as I did, to be like, listen, I'll take the job if I don't ever have to tell anybody what I'm doing. And so, but I literally the other day, and again, focused on the data and implementing a CRM for a company and trying to explain to them how the information that they're inputting there only helps build, like, we can help you in this cyclical model. We can take the information that you say, this was a good customer, we're setting this customer up, the feedback that you're giving me in that CRM, I can then turn back and utilize that information to help drive more sales for you. Not because you're
Yeah.
not a great salesperson, but you're one person, and I can help increase your capacity with that information. So it's up to you. It's only going to be as good as you make it, but the more information. And I laughed and I told him, I said, listen, nobody hated this as much as I did. I promise you, the number one regret that I have 20 years later in my career is not having that information. I wish today that I had the information from 20-year-old sales rep jumping out into the field all the way to today, and every success and every failure that happened along the way, because I'm like, there is so much missed information that happened along the way that I don't remember, I don't recall. And I'm like, now, did I know I was going to be in this industry forever when I started? Probably not. I should have. I grew up in it. I was already, but I didn't. Now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could be so much more effective if I had all of that information, just analyzing what we do every day. One of the most challenging things for me going out and training sales reps, being on the phone. I take a lot of phone calls from people that are in the dealer sales world, and so many questions. And I know this is probably true for you too. You forget what you didn't know. You really forget what you learned at some time. It's like this natural progression that happens where it's like, that feels like common sense, but oh yeah, I learned that in like year 3 or 4. Like, I didn't know that when I started out. I learned that over time. It feels like common sense now, but I didn't know that at one point. And being able to go back through that, especially with a lot of the things that I'm doing now, I'm like, gosh, being able to go back and see 20 years of wins and losses and looking at the information that came from that, not to mention the customers that I honestly probably forgot were customers at some point, to go back
Right.
and
Well,
double
I get that.
there's critical value that happens. And I hate it when I see a sales rep camped out in the parking lot and I know they're just sitting there typing in, spending half their day just typing in. That needs to all flow naturally. Today, it's got to flow naturally with what they're doing and what the goal, right back to being effective. But I just, the information and the data, I don't think enough salespeople are trained by the sales staff, whether that's sales managers, whoever is training them. They don't put enough emphasis on how powerful that can be for a sales rep today, right? And how
I was smiling so big. I'm sorry. I was smiling so big because I think a key part of my history career is that I transitioned into sales right after digital marketing. It was a year later. And so the majority of my career, I was selling marketing and helping companies sell equipment and services in all of those industries. And I was smiling so big when you were talking about refusing to track your sales because I was the exact same way. Like, I am a true data nerd, and you and I are cut from the same cloth. As big of data nerds as we are, we still refuse to do that because it's such a pain. And I think that's what makes you such a good leader to the sales teams that you've been in charge of, and good at consulting with people, because you understand their pain. Like, you understand how unnatural it is for them to pull over on the side of the road or wait to go into their next appointment because they've got to put this in CRM. But it goes back to the information that when you asked me, what marketing should they do? What's the first step for creating some sort of marketing plan? And it really is get your sales in order, get your sales numbers in order, make sure that your sales are tracking things. Because if you start a marketing campaign or any sort of marketing plan, you don't know if it works because you don't have a baseline of what your sales success is. And so, as painful as it is for the sales reps, it really is necessary in the business. Now, if you solve that problem, Jason, you've got the bazillion-dollar idea right here, because even the two of us, we hate doing it. I think it's being empathetic. One key factor of marketing is empathy. And I think with you, you can empathize with the fact that, God, we know it's painful, but here's why we need it. Here's what we're doing with that information. We're really, truly trying to help you see that you can be more, and we're trying to help other sales reps see that they could potentially be doing more. So if you're making 100 phone calls a day, or you're making X amount of visits a day, and this person over here is making half of that, but still making more sales than you or equal to than you, what are y'all doing differently? Like, wouldn't you want to know? Wouldn't you want to know, like, how you can work half as hard and make as many sales as you're making now? So I think really presenting that information of how how it's gonna be used changes the motivation behind doing it. Is it still really annoying? Absolutely. But I think that if you can dangle the carrot of what they might get out of it afterwards, hopefully you can tell them and then let them see that it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I think too, and this is part of that transition. I appreciate you saying what you did about the sales teams and being a leader and stuff like that. It means a lot to me. But the some of the transition that's also happened over the years when talking about salespeople is that if you'd asked me 10 or 15 years ago what a good salesperson looks like, I would, I want them to be outgoing, and I want them to be people that they're fueled off of other people, and they're hustlers. They're going to go out there and I want to see them make 100 calls a week and blah, blah, blah. Today, give me somebody organized that wants to work, period. I'll take it from there.
I
All the
agree
other
with that.
things, but give me somebody that's organized and is willing to do the work, because that is sustainability. That's what creates long-term success. And it also, back to the point, gives the marketing team back information that they can actually be active with. And one of the things that I tell salespeople is we have tagging systems in CRMs now. Do you know how effective it is for a marketing person if you went and tagged, hey, this person buys excavators, this person, just the people, because going back to the clicks and we talk about just market awareness, these are people, you roll out some machines that you're like, oh man, this is a great buy. You can go and call everybody, but how many people are you really going to effectively call and get a hold of and do all of those things, versus we can take a list that's tagged excavators for this excavator, and we can probably even narrow it down a little bit, and I can put that on their phone, I can put that on their computer. I can be highly effective in how we deliver that if you give us the information. If we have the information, we can put it in front of them, and I can put it in front of them in 2 days, every week, 2 days.
Technology's changed.
Right.
Yeah, the technology of those tactics have changed, and I think even your idea of the ideal sales rep, or the personality type that would be the ideal sales rep after you coach them, it's different because sales are different now. I feel like I really came into the industry and came into marketing and sales at such a transitional time. And although that came with its own set of challenges, man, I was fortunate. I look back on that and think, when I first started in sales, I would think, God, like, all these old school sales reps, they used to just wine and dine and go to all these parties, and they could just show up and make billions of dollars, right? Like, that's what it seemed like. And I don't think I was naive in that thinking, because back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, that's what it was about. It was about rubbing elbows, because it was relationship based and there was no way to track it. Now, when you go from selling print and potentially like TV advertisements or things that are not necessarily trackable down to that end user, and you transition that down to a single click or a single purchase or a single tag, like you're talking about, now all of a sudden your marketing campaigns, your sales process, it is so much more trackable and so much more performance based. I tell people, I'm like, man, like I was born in the wrong decade, right? Like I could wine and dine people and all these things, but I'm really proud of the fact that I can get into the nitty gritty and uncover those hidden gems of opportunities for people and let the data speak for itself. There's so many different personality types in sales. One of my colleagues, he was fun and he was charming and hilarious, really. And I tried that, and I'm not a funny person. I was like, I fell flat on my face with that sort of thing. Like, that's not me. Like, I'm data driven. And so I think for a while, I tried to be that boisterous sales rep that you think you have in your mind, of like outgoing and forward and all these things. And I'm like, what am I doing? And it was shortly after that when I really found my sales identity, that I'm a data driven sales rep. I want the numbers to speak for itself. And it may sound harsh, but I want them, even if they don't like me, even if they don't like my personality, I want them to have to work with me because I'm providing so much value.
Right.
And after I got over that whole personality type or sales identity situation that so many sales reps and companies find themselves in, that's when sales started coming in. So I think be authentic is probably the lesson in that, right?
I love that. That is the number one thing. We get to put a new sales rep out in the field. And the number one thing that I tell them is be genuine to who you are. Don't try to
Mm-hmm.
pretend you're something that you're not, right? Because people will see, not only will people just see right through that, but you're not effective in building your business. The second thing is identify what your strengths are today. Maybe you don't know the product very well. Maybe you don't have a customer base, but there is power in just the fact that if you get one customer, you go tell that first customer that they're your first customer and they're going to get 100% of your attention. You get
Yeah.
all of my attention. So I don't know who you're dealing with now. If they've got more than one customer, you're at a disadvantage when it comes to attention. And I know all the right people that I can get all the right answers, but it's like, be genuine to who you are as a salesperson, identify your strengths, and then listen for opportunity to apply those strengths that you have and those advantages, because it's so important. I think it's really funny too. And I was thinking about this earlier. We were talking about some of the costs associated with marketing. And I think that can be something that is a real turnoff. We talk about, oh yeah, cheap clicks. I can get clicks cheap. Leads are more expensive. And that, you and I both seen that turns people off sometimes. And they're like, oh, well, that seems like a lot of money. And I'm like, man, the number of steakhouses where I've seen it's like, and all you were doing there is you spent
Yes.
$1,000, $2,000 on a really quality lead, right? It was, let's monetize that back and see, okay, well, is that $7? Is it really? If that's a really good lead that has real potential, and a good lead being a lead we can generate business from, even if it's not tomorrow, right? But a lead that we can generate business from, is that really a bad lead? And was that really a bad investment, right? And if we did do the math on that, how many of those really good leads can we deliver to the table for the Ruth Chris dinner that we had? And then how does that really play out? It's a different perspective, but I did come up in that world where I lived a life of whining and dining for a really long time and still do it on occasion. It has been a relationship business. A lot of it will continue to become a relationship business. It just looks a little different today because part of bringing value to that relationship is creating what I was saying earlier, quality and convenience and brand awareness and things like that. That's all part of that relationship today, where it maybe wasn't as important in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, right? Like that, the more information that's delivered out there, that just becomes part of it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that one of the things that you've brought up is convenience. And I think it's convenience in multiple forms. Convenience to be able to get in touch with your sales rep, and that maybe that new sales rep has time to answer the phone, or convenience of ordering a product online. Amazon completely changed that. I can order that and it's going to be here in 2 days because of Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
So I think convenience is king. And I know that you and I have had conversations about how convenience of ordering maybe even equipment online could change in the near future. So I think that could be a whole nother session in of itself, right? Of where we're going with that. But I think really understanding that people are used to getting things quickly and finding that balance between quality and swiftness is it's hard. I see that a lot of sales reps make the mistake of even saying, "Hey, marketing, can you produce this sales sheet or can you produce this?" Yeah, we'll get it to the client by end of day. And it's like, yes, you want to get that information out to the client quickly, but at what cost? Like you're putting unnecessary strain now on your marketing department and increasing tensions and the information. Like maybe they needed to go collect the data, maybe they needed to go back to other resources, and it would have been better had you given that a little bit more time. So I think we're going to see and continue to see a struggle of quickness, and because of the convenience that we're so used to and quality. And I think as a sales rep, if you can figure out that balance and set clear expectations, you're going to win.
Absolutely. I wholly agree. Well, I know we've gone, instead of 30 minutes, we're bumping an hour now. So normal conversations for us, I feel like.
I love it.
Hey, thanks so much for being on. Is there anything that you'd like to just leave? You're available now for some consulting business as it relates to the marketing. How do people get a hold of you? What's the best way to reach out to you? Tell us a little bit about that real quick before we hop off.
Yeah, I think people can reach out to me directly if they even want to email me at 229jma@gmail.com. That is my personal email address. If they want to get in touch with you and get to me, that's perfectly fine as well. I think that I've really enjoyed our conversations throughout the years and I've learned a lot from you. I'm excited for this particular show because I think you have a lot to offer. So I'm looking forward to the other guests that you're going to have on and seeing where this takes us.
Well, I appreciate it so much. I feel like there's been definitely a two-way feed of learning and information, and always enjoy that. So thank you so much for being on, and thank you for sharing. I'm sure we'll at some point do a follow-up session. I feel like we probably this could have been an 8-hour podcast if we really wanted to. There's so much to dive into, but I appreciate it so much. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, and just really appreciate having you on. And I hope you enjoy all that you're involved in right now.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you.